Welcome to Exceptional TV. This week we have something a little bit different for you. I'm here live in the studio, and actually just Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, our leadership lab had an intensive. And what that meant is we spent 3 full days together going into all kinds of elements about negotiations. Some of the components were about how we deal with challenging moments in life when things go sideways. And that can be, things can go sideways because relationships get difficult at work, or just out there in the world, accidents, all kinds of things can really put us a little bit off our game and unexpectedly. And yet there are ways that we can up our game. There are very definitely things that we can do to better handle almost any situation. And some of these surprising ones, difficult people, difficult moments, difficult circumstances, unexpected trauma and difficulty and challenges, all of these things are the things that oftentimes we're not well prepared for. So this weekend was really a lot about diving into what it really means to lead our lives in those moments and how to lead in relationship to others. The lens for the weekend was really the negotiation lens, looking at how we negotiate or navigate most of those moments more effectively. Actually, just before I came on, I was looking at some information, and it has to do with loneliness. And I guess I was looking around at some VR, one of the things that I do enjoy doing, virtual reality, and as a way to engage socially with others is a growing area of interest. And the particular article that I was looking at was talking more in terms of seniors. Not like I've got anything to do with that these days, but it was looking at the issue of loneliness and seniors, but seniors are not the only ones. I was even driving back from a store last night, and I was listening to a young Australian singer. And a lot of her story about during the COVID timeframe, where she spent a lot of time on her own, lonely with just herself, and what that was like and what she went through. So loneliness is not something that is elderly only. But the interesting thing about it there is just some statistics. Apparently 43% of seniors feel loneliness is something that they experience on a regular basis. But the interesting fact that I heard, and this has to do more with your physical health and the impact of loneliness on your physical health, loneliness is more dangerous to our physical health than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 15 cigarettes. Loneliness has more of an impact on our whole system. And that was in some ways some of the things that we were going over on the weekend as we look at even our decision-making process, and how we do make decisions, what's going on as we experience stress and challenge. And it's really coming from the point of view of what our brains do and the cascade of chemicals that go through our brain as we experience different emotions and the like. So looking at it from that kind of internal point of view, not just the internal thoughts and feelings, but even just the biochemistry of our bodies as we experience things like loneliness, or things like the challenges or the anxiety of making decisions, or when we don't know what to do in a situation where we feel cornered by a particular conversation, or just facing the complexity or the difficulty that we feel when we go to ask our boss for a raise, or we are in a discussion and all of a sudden one or the other gets triggered, and all of a sudden emotions boil up, and then we find ourselves not knowing what to do, how to get that conversation back on track. So we were dealing with a lot of those kinds of elements over the weekend. And so it was kind of a deep dive, and it was an immersive thing. But this was a long way of getting around to the fact that a number of people who were in the program are in the helping fields and have worked with nonprofits and NGOs for many years of their life, or have worked in, for example, one of our key people in the program has been a chaplain for more than 20 years. She has dealt with inner city hospitals and the crises there, in the emergency rooms, dealing with families, dealing with unexpected death from accident or violence, when a parent loses a child, when children lose their parents, when you've got gang shootings, and you've got then whole communities of people that are not only grieving, but they're grieving angrily. And the challenges of all of the emotions that flow in those kinds of situations. Anyway, so the point there is that you've got a lot of people who deal with a lot of urgent and challenging situations ongoing. And that creates a certain stress and strain on the system, on your adrenals, on your body, on your sense of compassion, over the years and over the time. And it's not even just that. As we go through life, many times, the accumulation of our disappointments, so the accumulation of losses, and how that impacts us as we go through our life. So a lot of these were the topics that we dealt with. But I'm just going to bring it all back to something that was a little bit more positive. And that was where we had Jeff Kelly came in to speak to a lot of the international NGOs and or the nonprofits, those who are concerned about fundraising in this new normal. And so he spoke to us, and we got into the conversation, and some of it started as very informal conversations. And then we ended up talking a little bit about the messy parts of getting to success. And so that's pretty much where we began. And so
there's a lot to be said for believing in yourself and believing that your team can make it happen.
Yeah.
Right. And being willing to be a little messy along the way to success. Right. I mean, for all of us, I'm sure we've got stories like that in our lives, and the Seahawks definitely embody that here in Seattle.
So I'm glad you said something about being messy on the way to success, Jeff.
Yeah.
Have you ever had experience with that?
Absolutely. So I have a nonprofit and a for-profit brand, right? And so when we started our for-profit marketing brand first. And the way we got started, I was coming out of a high-tech career. And so the way we made that transition is that I purchased some online businesses. One of them was a e-commerce store for sitting electric desks. One of them was a big cooking portfolio of cookbooks and websites and comparison websites and things like that. And one of them was a business called Mystery Potato. We sent russet potatoes, handwritten messages on russet potatoes anonymously through the mail. And, if you're having thoughts like pet rock, you're in the right zone, and gag gift, and that's stupid. Like, these are all reasonable thoughts to be having. I actually bought the business for $750. Somebody else had started it. And over the course of 4 months, we were successful at taking the business viral. We had a week of news coverage that just escalated and escalated and escalated. And we went from, 5 orders a week and me buying potatoes at the grocery store to $22,000 worth of potatoes sales in one weekend. And that was just the beginning, right? That was just the beginning. Now the entire world knew. And the amazing thing was that, that day, that Friday when it happened, we had hundreds of orders.
I was missing out on all of your gems.
Yeah. So for those of you listening to the recording, we're talking about Mystery Potato and being sloppy and messy on the way to success. So I had taken 10 potatoes to the post office that morning, right? And now here we are, it's 6 p.m. Pacific, and we have hundreds of orders. And, the business was not in any position to deliver. We were coming up on Valentine's Day. Lots of these orders are, guaranteed delivery for Valentine's Day and things like that. And my wife and I are sitting in the car. We were going to go to the theater that night to see a musical and go out to dinner. And she said, do we just need to go back in the house and start working on potatoes? And we sat there and we talked about it. And the answer was, no, we should not. Because I mean, we'd already had this crazy week where orders were just stepping up and stepping up and stepping up, because there was no way two people were going to get through hundreds of orders, and who knows what tomorrow was going to bring and how many orders we would get that night. Like, there was no way we were going to be able to solve the problem the way we had been solving the problem. And so what we decided to do is go to dinner and go to the show. And on the way there, she pulled out her cell phone and we called everybody we knew in the Seattle area and said, "You're never going to believe this, but we need you at our house. Please bring your family and friends and kids and whatever. We're going to feed you and teach you and give you everything we need, you need. And we have no idea how it's going to happen." And we literally had people in my house for weeks when I would wake up in the morning and go to sleep at night. So I was recruiting potato artists. You've probably never heard of that job description, but I had 30 of them all around the world. And we messed up some orders and we had some customer service issues, and we just kept leaning forward into it, right? Instead of quitting, because I literally had, laying down in bed that night, I had the thought that I could just get up and go to the website and turn it off, and I would solve my problem, right? Literally, like, the orders would stop, right? And we would be able to solve the problem and get through it and recover. Like, are you kidding me? This is exactly what I wanted the business to do. And I'm sitting there at night thinking that I could quit, right? So the road to success is messy and it takes just leaning into it consistently and not giving up. And that's just a defining story when you look at what it takes to overcome wherever you're starting from and wherever you're trying to achieve, whatever you're trying to get to. And I did it with potatoes.
So I'm going to take that as an opportunity to jump right in here and give a little bit more of an introduction to Jeff. Other than being Mr. Potato, he is also, and then I'm just going to hand it right back to him. He's also an aspiring, in his own words, an aspiring master builder. You'll have to explain that to us. But in business and life, in other words, I think he's really an engineer and he likes to build things. And he enjoys tinkering, exploring, and games of skill. So come on over to the Smith household anytime. Jeff's strength is in the big business, and he uses the knowledge of multiple disciplines. And if you heard the beginning of his story, you can hear that, to discover possibilities and help others find paths towards their goals. His family, his friends, and his peers count on him to be true to his word and to deliver all of the potatoes that he said he would. Jeff graduated from a technology management career at companies like Expedia, Microsoft, and Amazon to start Butterflyly and Asset Lab. And as he'll explain more about those, but his strengths are in building process into teams, in growing remote teams, in starting online brands, and people development. He's also an animated and accomplished speaker, beekeeper, husband, father, and blueberry farmer. I am going to that's why you've got a blueberry shirt? I'm going to.
It's all right.
I'm going to hand it off to Jeff. Thank you.
It's nice to see you all, and thank you so much for joining us. Good to see those of you in Zoom and on the stream, and those of you recording or watching the recording later. I'm the strategy director at Butterflyly. Butterflyly is a marketing agency and fundraising strategy team focused specifically on nonprofits. We work with nonprofits and you hear the US language coming out. So nonprofits and NGOs all over the world. Our primary focus is on North America, but we also work with organizations that have a presence in North America. And they're doing things all over the world, and their goals are all over the world. And in the nonprofit space, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to build trusted long-term relationships with clients who either need help in anything digital marketing, so that's websites, SEO, social media, advertising, or they're looking for help upping their game on the revenue side of their organization. And so we're talking about fundraising strategy, how we're building donor relationships, what our approach is for grants or agency funding or whatever that might be. And the fundraising side, we spend a lot of time trying to unpack who are the donors or funding sources, what kind of relationship makes sense for growing and building those revenue lines, or what kind of revenue lines we need to add to an organization based on changes or needs to go cause impact or cause change. Our clients are generally organizations that have been around for, pardon me, for a couple of years and have had some fundraising success. And they're basically looking to create more on the fundraising side. On the marketing side, it can be any kind of organization from a thought and an idea and I need a simple, cheap website, all the way up through large organizations with many locations that simply haven't brought on a marketing team yet and haven't built that internally. And so they need an outsource partner to work with on marketing leadership and the technology side of online marketing. My team is generally based in the US, but as you can hear, remote teams is part of how I roll. And from the very moment that I started the business, the entire business is set up with the process and systems needed to work remotely. And so my team can be anywhere. They can be on vacation. They can be in any city. They can be around the world, and they are. And we're able to support clients that way with strategy and with marketing. So the topic at hand today is profitable fundraising. And if you have specific thoughts about, or specific questions or specific ideas or specific points you want to make sure I consider or cover, or situations, I would love for you to think about those. If you're here in Zoom, you can drop those into the chat and I'll watch for them. If you're watching it on stream, feel free to drop them in YouTube and I'll watch the comments there as well. I'm very happy to answer specific questions or talk about specific situations or specific challenges. So what I'm going to try to do in this time is essentially warm up the conversation. And then I would love for you to feel comfortable asking questions or bringing up ideas and kind of asking somebody who spends his time in fundraising strategy land what I think or how I would approach that or how my team would typically approach that. And we can just kind of see if we can fill up our fish tank of 45 minutes. Does that all sound good to everyone?
Very fine. Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about what happened in March 2020, because it has a big impact on fundraising here in November 2021. And that is many organizations lost the ability to fundraise based on physical presence or having donors in the room or running events with their audience together. And that forced, when that happened, that forced organizations, maybe they were good at it already and they were not doing it, or maybe they were horrible at it. It forced organizations to start to build relationships with donors digitally, right? When you can't get together in the room, you have to come up with some way to interact with donors or funders. Other than that, if you want to continue bringing in revenue. And so we saw everything from galas going online to grant applications going online and review sessions going online to agency reviews and relationships needing to be built through Zoom and video conferencing and phone calls and emails. And one of the keys to fundraising now, as we look at November 2021, is really clear, dedicated plans and strategies around building relationships with funders, be they donors or agencies or kind of any kind of funder, regardless of whether or not you can meet with them in person. Believe it or not, most organizations have a group of funders that like this. They enjoy this. They enjoy having interaction outside of an in-person event. Now, we've also, as organizations, also typically have some tradition or history around in-person fundraising that works very well and can be very lucrative. And so it's not that fundraising needs to flip itself over and we have to be different forever. What it means is that we need to not leave out the people that we can't see in the room with us. And we need a strategy for funding and generating those relationships with funders that can work in person and it can work remotely. It can work when a team can get together, and it can work when we can only get together in email or on Zoom. It really causes us to back up and think about relationships and relationship building, because that's so much of where funding comes from. And to understand what the strategy is that for the team at a nonprofit or an NGO. Many of the tools and techniques that we're using for relationship building and events, they've been here since prior to March 2020, they were just essentially underutilized. And we see that when you look at the generosity of donors in many countries here in the last 2 years. We can see that when we look at participation in events. We can see that if we look at funding levels coming out of foundations. We can see it when we look at how agencies have decided to continue funding or not, and how they have chosen to do that. So it's really all around us. And the key is really that focus on relationships. So again, you have homework in being here. Hello to those of you just joining in on the Zoom. There's a key aspect to you receiving value out of this time, which is that I do really want you to consider what questions you have or what experiences you've had recently, and how and what questions you might have, or how my team might approach the sorts of situations that you are in. Because that's what's going to make this most valuable to you. I know we're all over the world and we have all types of organizations or causes that we represent here. So I want to make sure that this is relevant. So if you have those, please do drop them in chat. What I'm going to do is I will spend just a couple more minutes talking about a couple very interesting observations that I've seen in fundraising and funding here in the last couple of years. And then we'll flip over to the concepts or questions you dropped in there. And I see you, Natasha. So I'll come around to that. So I'd like to talk for a minute about the Gala. If you're here in Zoom with me, give me a head nod or a hand raise if you're part of an organization that's run galas before, because if nobody raises their hand, I'm going to move on. Okay, we've got one. Okay, what about, give me a little more insight here. If you're funded through grants, give me some sort of positive indication. Okay, so not so much on grants. And then what about working with agencies? You have government agencies or government funding coming in. Okay, so now my question is, where are you all getting your funding? So feel free to unmute or drop that in chat, and because I want to tailor the conversation to kind of where you all are at and where, the kinds of situations you're seeing.
I think the folks that I see mostly through membership fundraising.
Through what? Sorry.
Members.
Membership.
Membership. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So let's talk about members then. Sorry, Natasha, we're going to start with members and memberships. The concept of membership can take a few different forms. I might want a membership because it brings me personal gain. I might want membership because it brings me access to a community, or because I'm part of a community. I might be a member because I know other people who are members, and in my community, that membership is important. When we think about relationships with members in any organization, anything from a chamber of commerce, which is kind of a different version of a nonprofit, through a nonprofit that is focused on, let's say, water resources and preservation of water, or delivering water systems to communities that don't have water systems. Any kind of membership model is based on an agreement between the organization and the member. And I don't mean, when I say agreement, I don't mean contract. I mean, as a member, I'm expecting something, right? That membership, that funding as a member is I'm willing to pay into that membership because I know there is something coming back to me in return. It might simply be the impact of the organization and what it is doing. So it might be more of a donation kind of mindset. It might be a community mindset where I'm getting a value of being a community member and I get to interact with a community member. It might be that there are resources coming back to me. Maybe I'm able to get access to training. Maybe I'm able to get access to doors that would otherwise be closed to me by being a member. In a time when digital communication and relationship building are extremely important, it's very important to understand your members. Why are they members? What keeps them a member? What's their story of becoming a member? Because that's what really empowers you as someone at an organization funded by members to understand their needs and how to meet them or exceed them. how to engage them so that they would talk to other people who might be interested in the same cause or be looking for the same benefits. So the tools have changed somewhat here in the last couple of years for doing this. If we look at, if we're thinking about specifically technology tools and how we communicate and interact as people. But at the fundamental level, providing some sort of value or some sort of good that a member wants to pour in with, that is still here. And we have to really keep sight of that and then plan around that concept so that we can continue to keep members engaged. We can go seek new members. We can message, in particular, we can message and tell stories that potential new members will bring them to engage. If you have membership questions, feel free to drop them in. And Natasha, let's take a couple minutes to talk about galas. Galas have changed a lot. And I think, like the one gem I would point out around galas is that organizations that are not planning to engage the people who are not coming in the room are missing out on a huge funding opportunity. So, whereas in the past, galas were thought of as a standalone event where if I could just sell tickets or get people into the room, if I could get my board members to sell tickets to their circles and friends, then if I could just get them in the room so I can have their credit card, then I'll make money. But the real learning from the last couple of years at many organizations is that there's actually more funding potential in the people who will not be in the room, but who believe in the organization. So any gala, any organization that's going to go to the trouble to try to pull together, particularly these days, an in-person gala, please, 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 please have a plan and a strategy for communication that spans weeks prior and the week after, and engages not just the people who are coming in the room, right, or coming to your online event, because 80% of your donors are probably not gala people. They will never come to a gala, right? You want to engage your audience in many ways based on where they are. This is the same value coming out in the membership conversation, right? Who are your supporters and your donors, and who is your community, and what do they want? Why do they support you? I've certainly gone to plenty of galas being here in the Seattle area that they were the standard in-person fundraising technique here in the Seattle area for way too long. And the amazing thing is that when we hit March 2020, in most cases, the organizations we work with generated more net profit with their online and digital events than they did if they had been in the room running their gala again in person. And so that then is the basis of this idea that, look, if you engage people and you understand what they want, you understand how to give them something, a fun and educational and empowering experience, it does not have to be as part of a gala. It does not have to be in person. It can be many different ways you can deliver that experience to that donor. And it's about the relationship between the organization and the donor. And I would encourage all of you, however your organization is funded, it fits with grant funding if you're funded through foundations as well. I know nobody raised their hands for grant, I'm sorry, but the concept is the same. If you look to your first degree connections and the first degree connections of your board and your leadership team, in that group of first degree connections, you probably have people who have a connection or are at a foundation that provides grants. That personal connection, that relationship means that your organization is far more likely to receive funding from that foundation than if you randomly just go do a database search for foundations that support the cause that you are involved in and you just send applications out. You can do that all day. You can waste a ton of money and time creating grant applications for grants that you will never receive. But you could go look at your LinkedIn connections. Sorry, I'm being a little US centric again, or your first degree connections. And you could find that one person working at a foundation and you could make that call and say, hey, I know you're involved with, I'm part of an organization that, I know you provide funding for organizations like this. Can you help me understand exactly what you're looking for? That one phone call can result in one grant being received, as opposed to sending lots and lots of grant applications out. And it comes back to that relationship. You had a relationship and you could leverage that relationship. All right, I'm going to hit a few of the questions that have come up in chat. So feel free to put any questions you've got around fundraising in there. And I want you to know that if this sounds interesting to you and you kind of like this philosophy around fundraising, this is what we do all the time for clients. We work through this idea of fundraising and funding and revenue is about relationships, and how do we identify those relationships and grow those relationships with funders. You can find me at butterflyly.com. It's butterfly with an extra ly.com. And just reach out and let me know what's on your mind, and we can find out what makes sense to talk more, or we might even be a fit for working together. So let's talk about digital events. Will they go away? I am probably a little bit biased because my career is in high tech and then in digital marketing. So I firmly believe that relationship building can happen in person as well as online, right? And we can see that in social media. We can see that in how social media works. There's a lot not to love about social media. There is a lot to love about social media. It shows us that people can build relationships without having to be in the room. So all digital events where you're expecting someone to show up at a particular day and time for a program, those I think are at risk. But an event where there's a replay possible, where there's been communication about the need and the goals and the impact and the desire, and how funders can help empower an organization, if we zoom out and consider it a communication and relationship building opportunity, as opposed to, for example, a one-time Friday at 5 p.m. live event, that zoomed out version of building relationships and helping tell your story, that is not going to go away. The method of communication may change. Maybe in-person communication is the way. Maybe newspaper ads or magazine ads are the way, not so much anymore. Maybe telling that story online, on the website, in social media, in your direct ask letters going out, or engaging with foundations or agencies and the leaders at agencies to have that conversation. That storytelling need, that is not going away. But the method it's delivered may change over time. So that was a question specifically from Karen on, will digital events go the way of the gala? Organizations raise a ton of money from galas every year. The interesting thing is that the gala model is also very expensive. There's a lot of production associated with a gala. And so from my perspective, when we're thinking about the revenue side and fundraising strategy, right, we're thinking about what are the strategic objectives of the organization and the board? What are the goals of the executive director? What are then the financial goals that a VP of development or development director is trying to work through? And of course, this could all be one person, one human being, right? Depending on the size of the organization. But we start very strategic at the top and we work our way down. And galas can raise a ton of money, and we can raise a ton more by not thinking about just the in-person model of a gala, and instead zooming out and being more effective at broad storytelling. I like to say that there's 3 stories you need to be ready to tell at any time when you're working in an organization, particularly when you're working in fundraising. But when you are a member of an NGO or a nonprofit, you need to be ready at any time to tell one of these 3 stories. It's your story, the story of impact, a very specific story of impact, ideally impact to people or a specific person or a family or a community. I don't know exactly, I don't know you all well, so I don't know exactly what level you're operating at or how you're trying to change the world, but a very specific story of impact. And then the third is the story of your organization. They're going to be different. You might be the executive director, and so your story and the organization story are very tight and very close and very interwoven. You may be a development assistant at a large organization that works worldwide. And so your personal story and the organization story are very different. But you need to be ready to tell those 3 stories at any given time, because that's what someone at a government agency considering funding, or a potential member, or a potential group of members, if you're able to get them all in a room and you're pitching what your organization does and why they would want to be involved. These are the 3 stories that people want to hear as they're considering funding. Let's talk about email. Karen asked a question about email. The challenges around email as a main form of connection and communication. It used to be if you could get somebody's email address, you had their attention. Like you got, how amazing is it that you could have access to their email inbox? They're checking their email every day. They're getting notifications on their phone when they get emails. I tell you, I probably get 100 spam or junk email a day in my inbox now. So email as a form of communication is an inefficient one. You don't know if the message has been received, and you are among many other communications right alongside it that are noise to the person who receives it. And you've all seen this, because if you're doing any kind of email engagement, email marketing, email, newsletters, you're seeing this because you're watching your open rates go down, 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 right? And you're like, how do I get my open rate up, Jeff? And it's like, okay, well, I can tell you how, but we're talking about email. And so email is going to trend down, down, down over time, because this is as a technical and communication solution, email is now becoming an inferior solution compared to some of the alternatives. This creates such an interesting challenge, because what should we be doing then? Should we be calling, because that takes a lot of time? Should we be using social media? Do we need to be texting? Like, what do we do if we can't just email? If we can't just throw an email over the fence to 5,000 people, then what do we do, Jeff? Yeah, this gets really interesting, and it comes back to, what are you trying to achieve, and who's your audience, and how do they want to actually engage? If you know how your audience wants to be engaged, then that provides the overall direction of how to communicate, right? So let's say I'm gonna take a very personal approach. I am a video gamer. I'm many things, as you've heard, but I'm a video gamer. One way you could get to me is through advertising in a video game. If your audience was full of people who played video games, then getting placement in video games, being able to communicate with gamers the way they do, which is a tool called Discord, having a presence on Discord as a communication channel, that would be exceptionally important if that was your audience. Now, it would shock me if any of you have that audience. But my point is, if you wanted to get to video gamers, you would have to communicate very differently than you are now, right? This is about your audience. If your audience is a group of people at foundations who consider grant applications, how do they want to be interacted with? What communication channels are they using? Are they using LinkedIn? Are they even using Facebook? Maybe, maybe not. Are they part of a larger, bigger business? And they have a business side and a foundation side, and so you need to interact with them from a very professional, highly professional manner. Or are these individuals who have gone through their career and they're now in retirement or semi-retirement, and they're not online, right? And because of their generation, that's not how they've learned to communicate. It's not how they prefer to communicate. What do we do about email, Jeff? Well, it always brings me back to, who is your audience, and do they care about email? Because gosh, if they open their emails, let's do email. But they probably, it's probably a communication mechanism that's trending down, and we need to zoom out, figure out who that audience is, and figure out how to build that relationship through communication in the manner they're going to prefer. Natasha made a comment that no one answers the phone anymore either. There's a lot that could be said about that. I think what I would say is that when my wife calls, I answer the phone. When my mom calls or my dad calls, I'm blessed to still have them with me, I answer the phone. I might be in a sales call. I mean, like, if they call right now, I'm not going to answer the phone. So if y'all know my mom and you're like, hey, go call him right now and let's see if he does it, don't do that, please. But there are people in my life that are going to have very high priority when they communicate with me, however they communicate with me, and they're going to get my attention right now. If I get a phone call from Google, if I get a phone call from the ABC Foundation, if I get a phone call from, someone I do not know directly, or I do not know who they are, or maybe I do know who they are and I know that they're going to ask me for money. Yeah, absolutely. I know, I can see it on my phone. And so I don't answer my phone, right? I don't want my time wasted. That's really what it comes down to. I either don't like confrontation, or I don't want my time wasted. And so There's an organization here in they're now homed in Portland, outside of Portland, called Cast for Kids Foundation. They do fishing events for special needs kids and soldiers. Fantastic organization. They do great events. The staff at the organization spends time, they're a fishing organization primarily. They're taking people out fishing. So with their best donors and their best sponsors, the staff members, the regional staff members all around North America are encouraged to take their best donors and their best corporate givers from their region fishing. And I don't know about y'all, but fishing takes a lot of time, and you're spending a lot of time on a boat and you're fishing, not catching, right? But literally Jim B will spend 2 or 3 days a month fishing with their best donors, as opposed to trying to recruit people to events or recruit new people to run their events, or all these other activities they could be doing as a regional leader. But the relationship between the organization and the funder is so important that as an organization, they make time to go fishing with those people. Why? Well, because they're fishing. They're from companies, they produce 1 billion fish hooks a year, or tackle boxes, or their donors, and their donors are, have been professional fishermen or successful people who are at this point in their lives. They'd love to go out fishing for a day with someone from Cast who really knows how to go fishing, right? That's great. Fishing's fun. So when those regional directors call that donor, that phone probably gets answered, because that relationship is stronger, right? If the executive director or Cast for Kids came up on that phone as the caller, yeah, that phone's probably not going to get answered, or it's, the time of answer, the likelihood of answering is much smaller. But if that person that has the relationship with the donor or the relationship with the funder is the one who calls, that answer percentage is much, much higher. That return percentage is much higher. Let's talk about compassion fatigue. Natasha had a question about that. There's an interesting thing, and if I'm off, if I don't go down the path that you're thinking here, Natasha, just put something in chat. Countries all around the world have had a different story here in the last couple of years. In the United States, of course, there's a COVID story, but there's also a social justice story that included rioting in many cities across the United States of America, right in the middle of, first and second waves of COVID in most of those cities. So very complicated, a lot going on from a human experience standpoint here in the United States, in 2020 in particular. In cities where there was significant social justice movements, what we saw is that from a fundraising standpoint, funding went to social justice causes. And if you were not in a social justice cause and mission, then you, as an organization, you may be really struggling with funding. Funding was being diverted and reprioritized, everything from agency funding to foundation funding to individual donors, right? It was being reassessed and reevaluated. And so if you were an animal rescue or a human rescue organization working, outside of the United States, you may have seen a significant hit to your funding. It was because in that city, in that area, the environment had changed around what the important issues and missions were that needed to be funded. So it's not specifically compassion fatigue, but I want to bring up that in certain, like if we look at the United States, in certain metro areas, the funding really shifted big time. And organizations that had been well-funded for years and years and years and built up great donor bases and great funding bases, all of a sudden they were struggling for money. And they were like, wow, right? All the money's going to social justice. That wasn't compassion fatigue. That was a change in investment of compassion. You can compare that with the Seattle area. The Seattle area did have, of course, social justice protests and all sorts of things happening and riots in Seattle. And if you're in the United States, you probably heard about the Seattle Autonomous Zone. That's not the appropriate abbreviation, I don't think, but where the city literally just abandoned an area in the city and said, great, y'all humans, you govern it. That's fine. I mean, shocking stuff. But we're not a city in the southern USA where the social justice issue is it's felt much more acutely. The money here in the Seattle region was flowing like water. If you were trying to raise money in the Seattle area, the last, in 2020 and early 2021, as long as you were engaging and trying to engage people digitally, you could raise money. The checkbooks were open and the credit cards were out. So I think the real message here is that there is an overall sentiment of donors in any particular geography and what's important, even if you look at globally. And any organization may be in that zone or out of that zone at any time. And the way you work to communicate and the way you build relationships and the way that you bring benefits and tell your 3 stories, they will directly impact, quote, the amount of compassion. But it's not just about what you can pour into it as someone seeking funding. It's also about what is happening in the world, what is happening in that geography, what is happening to the video gamers. Let's bring it back around. What are the video gamers playing and what do they care about right now, right? That will also impact your ability to raise funding. Digital fundraising. So Karen has asked, what direction in digital fundraising are you advising people to consider anticipating changes in the digital space? By the way, Karen, wave your hands or something like when we get to maybe 5 minutes to go. So I know that we're getting there because I am not paying attention at the time. Let's talk about digital marketing for a minute before we talk about digital fundraising. So digital marketing is changing very quickly right now. As an organization, of course, you've got an entire suite of digital marketing tools at your disposal. You have your website. What is your website for? Your website is for telling your stories. It's for converting visitors into donors or followers or people interested in as an audience. It's for identifying. It's for help bringing your mission, vision, impact. Identifying people who are potentials to receive that, or identifying communities you can impact with your core mission. It's serving a lot of different needs, right? It's a place where businesses that may partner or sponsor are going to come evaluate the organization. So a nonprofit website is extraordinarily complex. It's far more complex in the purpose that it's serving than a for-profit business website. A for-profit business wants 1 or 2 target audiences. It's really clear, right? But a nonprofit organization has typically 5 to 6 audiences we're trying to communicate with. And so, if you were to come to me and my team and say, hey, Jeff, here's where we are as an organization. This is what we're trying to achieve. The website is a really key tool to pretty much achieving anything you want to do because it's a key place where you're telling your story. It's a place where you want to bring people to. So in marketing speak, you can convert them to whatever the purpose is that you're trying to achieve. Social media is very important. Why? Because it's a great place to tell story. But social media has an interesting challenge in that it doesn't necessarily translate into dollars. It looks more like an expense than a revenue item. But gosh, if I look at ABC organization and XYZ organization, they have all these huge followings compared to us. Yeah, okay. Social media strategy is a very interesting place right now. What is worth the effort? What is worth the time and treasure of the organization to invest in social media? Should my organization be active on TikTok? I get this question is coming up more and more and more as TikTok becomes a much more prevalent platform. It's the Wild West right now on TikTok, like it was on Facebook 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so what do I do about it, Jeff? What's the strategy around TikTok for an organization? We can look at advertising. Google gives away $10,000 in free search advertising per month to organizations that are recognized and meet criteria, a variety of criteria. And so we have this advertising capability from Google, as long as we play inside their box and rules. But what about advertising in general? We see very large nonprofits spend an incredible amount of money on advertising. Oh my gosh, they're completely destroying their rules around administrative and fundraising costs compared to dollars going to mission. Yeah, they are, because they're raising an incredible amount of money doing that. They've said, okay, that's fine. We're okay. Donors who believe that we must only spend a certain amount of money on advertising from a percentage standpoint, those are not the donors we want. We're going to go raise a ton of money and change the world. And the donors that come to us are going to be the donors that understand that. So there's so much here in the digital marketing space when we start talking about nonprofits. Interestingly, digital fundraising is using many of these exact same tools. Oh, the other thing I would just mention is a shout out to search engine optimization, right? SEO is very mysterious, might not even be on your radar as a digital marketing tactic. SEO is very mysterious. We could talk about SEO anytime outside of this meeting because I don't want to waste the time of it here. But if your organization has physical locations or direct competitors for funding and impact, then search engine optimization is very important to the success of your fundraising at your organization. If you have physical locations, like maybe you're a Goodwill region, for example, and you've got lots of Goodwill stores, and you need to bring people into them, you need to play the business game in your digital marketing, which means you need search engine optimization, just like any other retail chain out there. So I start here when we talk about digital fundraising, because digital fundraising is an extension of this set of tools. There's some additional tools we bring in when we start talking about digital fundraising, like video conferencing, like tools that specifically support auctions, online auctions, and the ability to participate in an auction in person or online. There's a variety of things, right? Like contest tools and raffle tools. I mean, but ultimately we're still talking about the fundamentals of marketing and communication. And so what I want you to consider when we think about digital fundraising is that we can do we can raise an incredible amount of money with digital fundraising if an organization has the right cause, is in the right impact spot, where the audience is the kind of audience that wants to interact online and wants to fund online. I've seen a lot of success, particularly and you heard me name drop this earlier, in the space of water for organizations, where essentially subscriptions or memberships or monthly recurring donors, millennials in particular, seem to care a lot about providing water in communities outside of North America, and they're willing to give on a monthly basis, an amount of money that seems small, but that can provide a water system for 10 families. Right? Because what's being funded is a filtration device, right? To run off water hitting a roof and coming down a gutter, and right? And now they're drinking clean water instead of crazy water from ponds nearby. Digital fundraising is very, very successful in that model. It's a direct to donor marketing campaign, and then the tools around that to then engage that particular person. The successful organizations go as far as to have apps that will show the donor the specific community where their funds have been deployed, and show them examples, photos and stories and videos that are representative of that community, not necessarily those people, but representative of that community and the system that's been deployed and the whole thing. And now we're relation building through an app and a payment gateway online, and building a relationship with that donor. You can take it all the way over to the Gala kind of angle as well. But there is a huge space in digital fundraising. And the takeaway I want you to have is the one you've already heard, which is remember that your donors and your funders are all over the place. They're not just people who want one particular type of thing. If you zoom out and understand those different donor personas, then you know how to interact with people from a digital fundraising standpoint. You'll know if you have an audience that isn't going to respond to digital fundraising. You'll know because you'll understand your donors and what they're looking for.
So, Jeff, we are getting close to end time, but I'm going to take a chance here and ask you one more question, if I may.
Absolutely.
If people are somewhere in this mix, they might feel outside the sweet spot of where sentiment lies at the moment. For example, you said it's good to fundraise and you can raise the money. The checkbooks are open at certain times if you're in that sweet spot. When you're not in that sweet spot, how do you go about, for example, or how would you work with somebody to go from the place where they're somewhere their fundraising is not where they would like it to be? What is the analysis process? How do you assess what would be the right marketing, fundraising online system for them? How would you take them on that journey to where they were doing their online fundraising in the place that was best for them, having really analyzed and taken that time to look at who they are really working with, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, great question. I think I'm going to answer this question in the context of individual donors, people who are donors, because I think it really expresses the approach really well. When, if we were to engage on nonprofit strategy with an organization and trying to figure out how to grow the revenue side from individual donors, the very first thing we want to know is, who are your donors? What do they do during the day? Do they read the newspaper? Are they video gamers? Sorry to pound on that again, but it's a very acute, right? Are they or are they not? Like, have you asked? Do you know? Most organizations don't have any idea who their donors are. And sure, they have names and addresses and credit card numbers, but they don't know, they don't know what we would call the donor personas. So here's Jeff, the video gamer and blueberry farmer, and he did this potato thing. So he's clearly like a builder and a business person, right? And he'll jump into things, right, all the time. There's a group of Jeffs who are donors. There's a group of Natashas. I don't know you, but how do you spend your day? What do you do during a typical week? Do you have kids? Do you not have kids? Where do you live? What's your income level? Approximate, just commas and numbers of zeros. Just get me in the ballpark, right? If we can understand the 4 or 5 groups of donors at an organization, and we can understand them well, then it becomes very clear. Here's the key. It becomes very clear how you can get in front of more of those donors, right? If what you're seeking is people who, young people who are very social media savvy, then you're going to need to do social media marketing and a social media marketing campaign to generate a bigger donor base. If your organization is funded by retired career white collar workers, well, what companies and at what age do they retire and what are they doing in their retirement? Let's go get in front of them there, right? I don't watch much television, but I've just been traveling, and so I saw a little bit more than normal. Right now, it's time for, in the United States, Medicare annual enrollment. This is how people get access to benefits, and the insurance companies are advertising like crazy on the television for people who are 65 and older to sell these additional insurance plans. Well, why are they advertising on television? Because the people 65 and older are watching television. I'm not. If they were trying to get to me, that would be a failed approach, right? If I was trying to find 5,000 more Jeffs, that's not how you're going to do it. So if you're in this spot where you feel like your fundraising isn't where you want it to be, or you've taken a hit, or you're seeing a decline, the very first step is to back up and actually understand your donor personas. And once you understand those, now you can build a communication plan. Now you can build a benefit package. Now you can understand which donors are going to be interested in which stories. Remember, there's 3 stories: your story, client story, or sorry, not client, donor story, impact story, and then organization story. Different groups of donors might want different versions of that, because that might be what resonates with them. Now you can start to build a plan. What from a fundraising standpoint, why is Jeff a donor? Is he a donor because he wants to cause change in the world for the good? Is he a donor because he has a family member who's impacted by a medical situation and the organization is in a medical space that is working on research or support for people with that condition? Like, why is Jeff a donor? Each of your donor groups is going to be different on why. There's maybe 20 different reasons a donor might support an organization. If you understand those reasons and you understand what your donors are doing, then you can build a plan to reach those donors and grow your number of donors, or grow the amount of money coming in from a donor. Because if you understood why, here at Butterflyly, we do a 3x carbon offset on all of our own operations and all of the marketing activities that we manage for clients. So if we're managing your website, if we're managing social media, things like that, we have a mathematical model. We take all of that in, including our own operations, we multiply it by 3, and we plant trees to offset, in established forests to offset that carbon. If you understood why I cared about the environment, you could go find more people like me who care about the environment in that way. That is absolutely the key. And then once you know that, you can build a plan around, how do they want to communicate? What would be engaging to them? What's the next level of the relationship with them? And now you can build a fundraising plan around that. If you just start from, oh my gosh, I need more money, it's going to be really hard unless you understand your donors.
Well, thank you very much. I guess we've just got to really take the time to find out about the people that we're working with and or who are donors, who are our clients, stakeholders, the various stakeholders. Thank you for taking us through all of that. Are there any other questions before Jeff goes? Because this is your chance to get an expert blueberry farmer.
Yeah, to talk about fundraising.
to talk about the
if you'd like to stay connected, you can certainly reach out. We're butterflyly.com, butterfly with an extra LY. And I'm also the host of the Non-Profit Fundraising Podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcast. It's called the Non-Profit Fundraising Podcast. And in that podcast, we cover this relationship-based approach to funding. I'd love to have you as listeners and subscribers to that. And if you feel like you know someone at an organization well who could use this kind of message and could build it into how they're approaching their funding or their revenue, I would love to be introduced to those folks. You could reach me at jeff@butterflyly.com. And we can also talk about the story of the name, because lots of people ask me about the name Butterflyly. And if you'd like to learn that, feel free to reach out to me.
And we will make sure that contact information is available when we get this online. We'll put the information and so that people can get hold of you. Thank you so very much for taking the time, for landing last night, and for getting things together for us today. Thanks so much, Jeff.